Yo, what the hell's up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching Underwater. Underwater is a story about a group of scientists who are at a high-tech facility at the deepest parts of the ocean floor as they're fighting for their lives as the walls around them start to cave in. They at first believed that it was caused by an earthquake, but they soon start to realize that it was caused by something else. This movie was actually on my list when it first came out back in January, but unfortunately for them, it ended up also being the 1917 national release date. So January horror thriller versus quite possibly the best movie of the year, I stand by that decision. Nevertheless, I was very happy to see this film come back and circle around because, well, the premise intrigues me. I, for one, am horrifyingly fascinated by the ocean and all its possibilities because it is just so unknown to us. Considering how much we have learned about the planet we live on, the species, the way it works, the ins and outs over our centuries of existence, we have a very alarming lack of information about the stuff that happens literally miles below the ocean surface. Let me repeat that. Miles worth of unaccounted stuff happening beneath the ocean that we just have no idea what's going on. There is so much real estate down there, and still people are more fascinated by space than what's going on down there. And they really should, because if there is indeed life at the bottom of the ocean, especially life that is capable of messing us up, they have every reason to. We have given them all of the reasons to hate us over the years. Pollution, litter, sinking ships. Hell, I bet the Titanic was really a well-received gift from above down there. Aliens have no real reason to hate us before meeting us. After they meet us, they'll probably hate the hell out of us. But creatures at the bottom of the ocean? They have every reason in the world to want to throw hands if we ever showed our face down there. I don't know about you, but that's interesting to me. I mean, there's literally just infinite possibilities on what's going on down there, and I love movies that find new, interesting ways and angles to explore the world that we think we know so well. And this movie, for that reason, made me pretty excited. The pros for this movie start with its atmosphere. This is a very atmospheric movie, and I really appreciated that. Starting with the set design, the interiors of this facility as they're exploring it after it's been destroyed is just so fascinating to me. And even though you never see it actually inhabited prior to, all hell breaking loose, which happens pretty much immediately in the movie, you still feel like it's a space where people have walked these halls and did their thing. It almost reminded me of like a Resident Evil game, like in the last leg of damn near every Resident Evil game you play, you end up in like an Umbrella Corporation research facility where, the virus and research toward the virus was accomplished. And then eventually that place got swallowed by the thing it was researching. Similarly, this place at the bottom of the ocean eventually gets swallowed by the ocean. And there's just something about that, like that man versus nature vibe. Seeing it just cave as a result of its own research, in a sense, is very interesting to me. There's an old saying, something about if these walls could talk, and the walls of this place really spoke volumes. The lighting was a big component of that too. I mean, if you think about it, being miles below the surface, you are so far down in the ocean that you are just devoid of all sources of light. There is no natural light to call upon. So all the sources of light that you're seeing on screen has to come from somewhere. It needs to be manufactured, whether it's a light bulb or it's the lights that are on their suits or whatever. This movie, I felt, controlled the lighting really well, and it really set the tone that you are this far below and every source of light is crucial. It really sells that realistic, claustrophobic vibe that you would have if you were down in this facility. The lack of light is concerning, and it played well. The pairing of the cinematography and the editing also was fantastic, particularly highlighting the portions that were shot underwater. It's obvious that they didn't shoot large portions of it underwater because, well, that's just not practical. So they obviously had to do some effects, some post work, and in-camera stuff to make it appear as if it is underwater. And they did a fine job rendering the movements and the bubbles and the swaying and everything and the lighting. The light doesn't travel quite as far as it would otherwise. Just everything about it looked great when they were underwater, at least for the stuff that is in like immediate proximity. The water effect looked great. To acquire this effect and pull it off successfully requires some production finesse, and this movie has it. I also really liked the creatures in this movie, and I don't consider that a spoiler because you find out pretty damn quick that it wasn't an earthquake. These creatures looked great by design. I mean, these things were just horrifying looking. Things that you would imagine live at the bottom of the ocean. These things are the stuff of nightmares. And they also moved really well in the water, pairing with the great water effects. I mean, you really get the sense that these creatures have adapted to living in these conditions down here at the bottom of the ocean. Kind of like the creatures in The Descent, which you kind of get a sense that they thought everything through for creatures that live in these caves. And you get a similar sense with the creatures at the bottom of the ocean here, that they put a lot of care and time into trying to think everything through to make it feel as if these creatures could legit be down there. It's not all about the visuals, it's also about the practicality. And this movie and its creatures had both. Outside of really all the production notes, I mean, this was just a fine sci-fi thriller. I mean, I wouldn't say it was fantastic by any stretch, but I was engaged throughout the whole movie. I was interested. I never zoned out or anything. It actually had some really brutal moments that I thought were really pushing the envelope a bit for a PG-13 movie. I mean, I was entertained throughout this whole movie. However, though, my cons kind of start around this area because while I love the atmosphere and tone that this movie was putting forth, I also felt like it kind of tried to keep its energy up as a result of a lot of jump scares, and it was really predictable in all of the sequences in which there was tensity to it. Which is, whatever. I mean, that's just kind of the horror movie genre. 80% of them rely on jump scares. It kind of is what it is. But you kind of, when you look at a movie like this, which puts so much thought, care, and time into designing all these production elements, but it doesn't seem like they were really kind of putting that much more thought into orchestrating really original sequences and scares. It's just kind of a bummer that they resulted to cheap tricks. Speaking of cheap, now I'm not saying that this movie had a low budget or even looked like it did. I didn't look at the budget information of this movie, but you can tell at a lot of points throughout this movie, particularly the wide exteriors of this facility, that poor CGI starts to kind of rear its head in a little bit. I mean, like, the smaller scale stuff that they could do a little bit more practically works great, but it's just like those big, vast shots of this facility and action going on out there, it just doesn't look quite as good. And while I, for the most part, appreciated the realistic and dramatic lighting, or lack thereof, in this movie, I did feel like at times it was very difficult to see what the hell was going on, particularly during action sequences, because it was too damn dark. Creating movies and scenes that are set in the dark are very difficult because you don't want to show too much because then it's not scary or accurate for the viewer to see it happening. But then again, they need to be able to see something to see what is going on. I mean, when you're walking in a pitch dark room where you can't even see the hand in front of your face, that's very scary, but how do you portray that visually? So it's kind of a balancing act that I feel like this movie didn't always do the best job of achieving. Outside of these minor production woes that I spotted, I also didn't think there was really much for characterization here. As I mentioned before, things start to happen in this movie almost immediately, so you don't really get acquainted with these characters before they enter crisis mode. You don't get a sense of what their life is like at the surface when they're with their friends, family, loved ones, kids, significant others, what have you. You also don't get a chance to get to know them and what their life is like in this facility. What's it like living down here? The only version of these characters that you get is when all hell is breaking loose and they're in crisis mode. And it's hard to really get a beat of characters where they're in this kind of frantic mindset. There are a few exchanges here and there that maybe hint at characterization, but they really just feel like the writer giving us, the audience, a break between action, mayhem, blood. It doesn't feel like these conversations really mean anything, or at least give you anything that you really care about. It just kind of remains that these characters just feel expendable despite the fact. Speaking of expendable characters, as much as I hate to say this, T.J. Miller's character in this movie should have been expended. Don't get me wrong, I love the dude. He is hilarious, but he is a fish out of water in this movie. Yes, I appreciate the irony of that metaphor. I acknowledge it. Let's move on. He plays the same character he always plays. I mean, T.J. Miller is T.J. Miller, and it usually works in every movie he's in, but this movie, T.J. Miller being T.J. Miller, every line he speaks just feels like it is battling with the tone of the rest of this movie. I mean, he just does not fit here. I mean, I never got a sense that this character belonged in this facility, like before all this happened. Like, why is this person in this multi-million-dollar facility drilling and researching at the bottom of the ocean? Like, I never got a sense that he belonged down there. I could buy it from every other character in this movie except for TJ Miller. I mean, I love him, he's hilarious, but he just did not belong here. All in all, I would say this is a very fine sci-fi thriller. The production design was very ambitious and, it's very watchable. I do not mind the $6 I spent on Amazon VOD to watch this movie. You really could do so much worse than watching this. I promise you that. I'm gonna give Underwater a B-. If you really look at the history of January horror thrillers, I mean, this year, The Grudge, The Turning, the previous year's Escape Room, Insidious, The Last Key, I mean, it is littered with doozies, and this movie does not feel like it ranks among them. Is January becoming a more promising month for horror thrillers? Maybe. I'd like to hope so. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe and thanks for checking in.